What this woman did next will shock you. You absolutely have to see the end. At 1 in the morning, my daughter collapsed at my doorstep. Her eyes were bruised and her lips were split. Sobbing, she confessed, "My husband Mason, he hit me because of his mistress." I held her in silence. I helped her into the house, and without a word, I put on my reading glasses, the ones I wore for 30 years on the bench. Then I dialed my lawyer's number. "James, start the plan, now. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, do me a favor and give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story from. I really want to know how far this story has traveled." I had just turned off the late-night news and was settling onto the sofa, my eyes heavy after a long day. Retirement was supposed to be peaceful, but my mind, a retired judge's mind, never fully shuts off. It was a quiet night in our Ohio suburb, the kind of quiet that feels thick and heavy. The only sound was the distant hum of the highway and the occasional rustle of leaves in the autumn wind. My body felt every one of its 65 years. I just wanted to drift off to sleep. It was exactly 1 a.m. I remember because the grandfather clock in the hall had just begun its lonely single chime. Suddenly, a frantic, desperate knocking hammered at the front door. It wasn't just loud. It was terrified. It made me jump, my heart instantly pounding in my chest. My old instincts, not from the police force but from the courtroom, kicked in immediately. This wasn't a friendly visit. This was trouble. Who could possibly be knocking like that at this hour? I thought, my voice catching in my throat. I moved quickly to the entrance, my hand instinctively grabbing the heavy brass poker from the fireplace. "Just in case, who is it?" I called out, my voice more steady than I felt. My years of projecting across a courtroom served me well. There was no answer. Just a series of weaker knocks, a desperate scratching sound, followed by a choked, trembling voice that shattered my world. "Mom, open up, please." I almost froze solid. It was the voice of Olivia, my daughter, my only child. I fumbled with the deadbolt, my fingers suddenly clumsy, my heart hammering against my ribs. The moment I swung the door open, Olivia collapsed into my arms, trembling like a leaf in a storm. I hugged her tight, her body feeling impossibly frail, as if she didn't have an ounce of strength left. "Olivia, what is it?" "Honey, what happened?" I asked, my voice breaking, all judicial composure gone. The yellow glow from the porch light fell on her face, and the sight paralyzed me. Her beautiful face, the one I had memorized from the moment she was born, was a canvas of violence. Her bottom lip was split wide open, with a line of dried, dark blood crusted at the corner. Her right eye, the color of a stormy sky, was swollen almost completely shut. She was clutching her stomach with both hands, her body curled in on itself as if trying to hold her broken pieces together. "My husband, Mason, he hit me." "Because of his mistress," Olivia whispered, her voice a ragged, broken thing before she dissolved into heartbreaking sobs that shook her entire frame. I felt my blood turn to ice, and then, just as quickly, boil into a rage so pure and hot it threatened to consume me. My daughter, my sweet, gentle Olivia, the one I raised to be kind and strong, was standing in front of me, shattered by the man I had welcomed into our family. The man who had called me Mom. I guided her inside, my arm a steel band around her. I settled her gently on the sofa and ran to the bathroom, not for a damp cloth, but for my comprehensive first aid kit. "Stay still, honey. Let me see," I said, forcing a calm into my voice that I did not feel. Inside, my mind was a whirlwind of legal statutes, precedents, and a white-hot desire for retribution. I carefully cleaned the blood from her lip, but it kept welling up, red and raw. The cut was deep. This wasn't just a slap. This was a punch. This carried a weight, a malicious intent that my mind, trained by decades on the bench, recognized instantly. It wasn't just an injury. It was evidence. Olivia kept clutching her stomach, her slender fingers trembling. Gently, I pried her hands away. I lifted the hem of her silk blouse, and dear God, I almost recoiled. A massive, ugly bruise, a sickening galaxy of purple, black, and blue, spread across her abdomen. It was clear she had been hit not once, but repeatedly, viciously. I felt the air leave my lungs, as if I had taken the blows myself. "Olivia, who did this to you?" "It was Mason, wasn't it?" I asked, my voice a low growl, vibrating with a rage I hadn't felt in years. Olivia couldn't answer. She just wept, her sobs the only sound in the silent house. They were the sound of my heart breaking. Without another thought, I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. The 24-hour line for the best private clinic in the city. "Dr. Miller, please get ready." "I'm bringing my daughter Olivia in," I said, my voice clipped and professional. My car was in the garage, pristine and ready. I didn't need a taxi. I was in control now. While I got the car keys, I sat next to Olivia. I wrapped her in a thick cashmere blanket. Her cell phone, which she'd dropped on the coffee table, lit up. The screen glowed with his name, Mason. 7 missed calls. Then, a series of messages began to appear on the lock screen. "Olivia, you better not open your mouth. You know what happens if you do. Open your mouth, and you will lose everything." I felt the blood rush to my head. My hand shot out to grab the phone. I am a judge. I needed to see more. I needed to know the scope of his depravity, to document every threat. But Olivia, though weak, snatched it from my grasp with a surge of panic. "Mom, don't! Please don't look. It's nothing," she pleaded, her eyes wide with a familiar, terrifying fear. The fear of a victim protecting her abuser, not out of love, but out of sheer terror of the consequences. I didn't press her. "Not yet," I just squeezed her hand. "I'm here, honey." "I'm right here. Nothing is going to happen to you ever again," but inside I knew. This wasn't just a domestic dispute. This was a declaration of war. At the hospital, the bright, sterile lights of the emergency entrance felt cold and clinical. I helped Olivia out of the car, her body still shaking. Dr. Miller, a man I'd known for years, was waiting for us. His expression was grim as he took in Olivia's state. He didn't waste time with pleasantries, immediately motioning for a nurse to guide my daughter to a private examination room. I followed, my sensible shoes making no sound on the polished linoleum floor. When the nurse gently removed Olivia's jacket, I had to physically restrain myself from gasping. It was worse than I thought. Beyond the obvious injuries to her face, her slender wrists and shoulders were covered in a series of dark, cruel marks. Purple and reddish bruises, shaped almost like fingerprints, like silent accusations of being held down, of being restrained. I stood there, motionless, my knuckles white as I gripped the back of a visitor's chair. I was containing a fury so immense, I felt it could level the entire building. "What did this monster do to you?" I thought, but I didn't say it aloud. I wouldn't risk Olivia breaking down again. Not yet. Dr. Miller methodically noted each injury, his face a mask of professional gravity. "We need to do an X-ray and a CT scan. With a blow to the abdomen like that, I want to rule out any fractured ribs or internal bleeding," he said, his voice grave. I nodded, my mind already processing. "Get me a complete certified copy of her medical report, doctor. Every chart, every photo, every note you take. I want it all," I instructed him. This wasn't a mother's request. It was a judge's order. He understood. While I waited for the results, I went to the admissions desk to handle the paperwork. My cell phone vibrated. An unknown number. I knew instantly. It was Mason. Rage, cold and sharp, surged through me. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't deserve my voice. Not after what he had done. When I returned to the room, Olivia had drifted into a shallow, exhausted sleep. I pulled the blanket up to her chin, my hands still shaking slightly, not with fear, but with adrenaline. Looking at her broken face, my memory flashed back to the Olivia from before. The vibrant law student, full of life, who used to debate legal theory with me over dinner, her eyes sparkling with passion. That fire was gone, replaced by a deep, hollowed-out fear. I sat in the chair by her bed, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. My heart felt like a lead weight. I was her mother. I had given her every advantage, every protection, and I had let her fall into the hands of a predator like Mason. I blamed myself. But that blame was quickly solidifying into a diamond-hard resolve. I could not let my daughter suffer one moment longer. Never. Again. After they had her on an IV drip and she was stable, the test results came back. The news was a small mercy. Several severe soft tissue contusions and a hairline fracture on one rib. No internal bleeding. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The physical wounds would heal, but the wounds to her soul, those would require a different kind of justice. I took Olivia home. I settled her into her old childhood bedroom, the one with the pale yellow walls and the window seat overlooking the garden. I made her a cup of chamomile tea, left it by her bedside, and quietly closed the door. It was nearly dawn. A pale gray light was filtering through the kitchen window. I walked out to the front porch to get the newspaper, and I saw my neighbor from across the street, Sophia, out for her early morning power walk. When she saw me, she slowed, her face etched with concern. "Elizabeth? Is everything okay? I got a notification from my Ring camera around 1 a.m. It picked up a lot of noise from your front door, someone crying." I took a deep, steadying breath. "Sophia, it was Olivia. Her husband. He beat her. She had to run here in the middle of the night." Sophia's friendly face hardened, her eyes flashing with anger. "That man? Mason? How dare he? That man has no shame at all." I nodded, saying nothing more. But I knew in that moment I had an ally. Suddenly, I remembered her camera. "Sophia, your camera. Did it record the video?" I asked, my voice urgent. She nodded immediately, pulling out her phone. "Of course. It saves everything to the cloud." She opened the app and showed me the video. There it was. My Olivia at 1:02 in the morning, knocking desperately, her faint broken sobs echoing clearly in the crisp night air. Seeing that footage, hearing her cries again, it was like a knife twisting in my gut. But I knew, with absolute certainty, it was the cornerstone of my case. "Can you send me that file? The original high-resolution file?" I asked. "Of course," she said, her fingers already tapping on the screen. "Elizabeth, get justice for that girl. I know you can do it." I went into my study, the room where I had written countless legal opinions. I opened the bottom drawer of my mahogany desk and looked at the tools of my trade. Not a police uniform, but my old worn leather briefcase, my personal laptop, and a set of encrypted hard drives. Each object felt like a weapon. Each movement was an oath. I was not just Olivia's mother. I was a retired judge of the state Supreme Court, and I would use every ounce of my knowledge, my connections, and my power to protect her. When Sophia's email arrived with the video file, I downloaded it. I sat at my desk, the first rays of sun streaming through the blinds, and began to build my case. I connected a drive to my laptop and carefully created a folder, password protected with a 24-character alphanumeric code. I saved the video. I sat back, watching the progress bar fill. I knew from that moment on, there was no turning back. I had just declared a silent legal war, not just for Olivia, but for the very principles of justice I had sworn to uphold. By the time I had triple-backed up the video from Sophia's camera, the clock on my desk read 8 a.m. Olivia was still fast asleep, her breathing shallow, her face a heartbreaking map of her husband's cruelty. I went into the kitchen and made a simple chicken broth, the warm, savory smell of thyme and rosemary filling the quiet house. I brought the tray to her room and woke her gently. She opened her swollen eye, her gaze unfocused and tired. She was surprised to see me, fully dressed in a sharp blazer and slacks, sitting by her bed. "Mom?" she murmured, then shook her head weakly. "I'm not hungry." I sat on the edge of the bed, my voice gentle but firm, the same tone I used with frightened witnesses. "To be strong, to fight back, you have to eat, Olivia. We need our strength for what comes next." She looked at me, her good eye filling with tears, but she reluctantly took the spoon. Seeing her swallow with such difficulty squeezed my heart. Just a few years ago, Olivia was a radiant bride, her smile lighting up our entire garden as she said her vows to Mason. Now, she was a shadow, a ghost in her own childhood bedroom. I decided it was time. I took out my personal cell phone. I opened the camera, making sure the settings were on the highest resolution and that the timestamp feature was enabled. "Honey, I need to do something," I said softly. "It's going to be hard, but it's the most important thing we can do right now." Carefully, I began to photograph every single injury. The split lip, the bruised, swollen eye, the horrific contusion on her stomach, the ugly finger-shaped marks on her wrists and shoulders. With every click of the camera, I felt like I was documenting not just the physical wounds, but the deep, searing damage to her soul. I wasn't just a mother taking pictures. I was a judge collecting evidence. Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C. Each photo was a nail I was going to hammer into Mason's coffin. Just then, Olivia's phone, which I had placed on the nightstand, began to ring. The screen lit up. Mason, my heart didn't stop. It turned to stone. Before Olivia could even flinch, I grabbed the phone and powered it off. She looked at me, a flicker of her old terror in her eyes. "Mom, if he finds out I told you, he'll hunt me down," she whispered, her voice trembling. I took the phone, popped open the SIM card tray with the edge of a paperclip, and removed his SIM card. I dropped it into my pocket. Then, I took a brand new, unregistered SIM card from my desk drawer and inserted it into her phone. I powered it back on. "He will not find you," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "He will not have the chance to threaten you again." I looked at the clock. It was almost 10 a.m. It was time for the next step. I called James Ellison, our family lawyer and my former protege. "James, I'm sending you a file. It contains the certified medical report from Dr. Miller and a video from a neighbor's camera. I have my own photographic evidence as well," I told him, my tone all business. He scheduled a meeting for that afternoon to review the evidence. Meanwhile, Sophia came over with a pot of homemade chicken noodle soup. "This is for Olivia to get her strength back," she said, her voice warm with genuine kindness. "And Elizabeth," she added, her eyes meeting mine, "if you need a witness, I will stand up in any court in this land and testify. Count on me." I looked at her, my neighbor of 20 years, and felt the tight knot of isolation in my chest loosen just a little. In the afternoon, Olivia tried to rest, but she was plagued by nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat. I sat by her side, stroking her hair. During one of her delirious moments, she began to babble, her voice full of fear and humiliation. He pushed me. And Emily. She was there. She was in our house, standing in the corner, just mocking me. My blood ran cold. The mistress wasn't some abstract concept. She was a person with a name. "Who is Emily?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Olivia told me, in a weak, fragmented voice, that Emily was Mason's mistress, that he had been brazen enough to bring her to their home, their marital home, on several occasions. She would flaunt her presence, provoking Mason, who would then take his rage out on Olivia. Her story was like a shard of glass in my heart. I had eaten at the same table as Mason. I had toasted his success. I had believed he was a decent man who would cherish my daughter. And now I learned he was not only cheating on her, but allowing another woman to humiliate her in her own home. This wasn't just an affair. This was psychological torture. As I sat by her bed, I felt a new level of fury. A cold, calculating rage. I pulled out my phone again and took more photos, this time close-ups of the bruises on Olivia's wrists, including my own watch in the frame to show the exact date and time. With every photo, I felt like I was forging a weapon. That afternoon, I took a still-shaken Olivia to James's office. I laid a portfolio on his gleaming conference table. It contained everything. The high-resolution photos of the injuries, the certified medical report, the Ring camera video on a thumb drive. James reviewed it all, his expression growing more grim with each item. He finally looked up, his voice firm. "Elizabeth, this is an incredibly solid foundation for an abuse case. But to truly bury him, to strip him of everything, we need to prove public adultery. If we can do that, he'll have nowhere to run." I gripped the handle of my purse, my knuckles white. I knew exactly what he was saying. I knew exactly what my next step had to be. I was no longer just a grieving mother. I was a hunter, and I was going to use every legal and investigative tool at my disposal to make Mason pay for every tear my daughter shed. That night, I didn't take Olivia back to my house. I couldn't risk Mason getting desperate and showing up. Instead, I left her at Sophia's, my trusted neighbor. Sophia opened her doors without a second thought, promising to keep a close watch. I returned home alone, my heart heavy but my purpose clear. I changed out of my blazer and into an old pair of jeans and a dark, hooded sweatshirt. I looked like any other person, not a retired judge about to conduct surveillance. I took a small, high-powered digital camera with a telephoto lens from a locked drawer in my study, checked the battery and the memory card, and left in my unassuming sedan. Every quiet turn of the tires on the suburban streets felt like a move on a chessboard. I was entering a war, not just for Olivia, but for the justice I had dedicated my life to. I parked my car in a darkened side street near the Oak Room, the upscale steakhouse Olivia had told me Mason and his friends frequented. The warm, inviting light from the restaurant's windows spilled onto a small section of the street. I slouched down in the driver's seat, camera in hand, and waited. The patience I had learned over decades of long, tedious trials was now my greatest asset. Around 8 p.m., Mason's ostentatious silver Mercedes pulled up, its headlights cutting through the gloom. My heart gave a painful thud, but I remained perfectly still, raising the camera. Ready. A few minutes later, a woman emerged from the passenger side. She was wearing a tight, expensive-looking dress. Her blonde hair was perfect. Her lips were painted a deep, glossy red. She walked with a self-satisfied, provocative confidence. I recognized her from a photo Olivia had once shown me from a company party. It was Emily, the woman who had watched my daughter be humiliated. Mason got out, walked around the car, and wrapped his arm around her waist with a disgusting familiarity, his hand resting far too low on her back. Seeing him so casually affectionate with this woman, while my daughter was lying in a bed full of bruises and fractured ribs, made my vision go red. He, the man who had vowed to love and protect my child, was now flaunting his betrayal for all the world to see. I started snapping pictures. The telephoto lens was perfect. The restaurant's lighting illuminated their faces clearly. Each click of the shutter was like a bullet fired. Each photo was a stab of pain, but also another piece in the damning mosaic I was assembling. I followed them, keeping a safe distance, as they left the restaurant an hour later. They didn't go home. They drove to a small boutique hotel downtown, one known for its discretion. I didn't get close. I parked across the street, zooming in, and took several clear shots of them entering the lobby, hand in hand. Then, I drove around to the parking garage and took a picture of Mason's license plate, making sure to frame it so a nearby bank's digital clock, showing the date and time, was clearly visible in the shot. Each photo was a kill shot. I knew I had it. I had the irrefutable proof of public adultery that James said we needed. Mason would have no escape. When I got home, I immediately opened my laptop and transferred all the photos to a new, encrypted folder labeling it Infidelity. I called James, my voice vibrating with a cold, triumphant determination I couldn't hide. I have them. James, crystal clear photos of his infidelity. Their faces, the hotel, his license plate with a timestamp. Everything. James's voice was firm on the other end. Excellent, Elizabeth. Keep them secure. Do not let him know you have them. This is our ace in the hole. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I felt a grim satisfaction, knowing I was one step closer to dismantling Mason's entire life. Just then, my other line beeped. It was Olivia, calling from Sophia's phone. Her voice was thin and laced with panic. Mom, he just called one of my friends from college, asking where I am. When she said she didn't know, he threatened her, Mom. He told her she'd regret it if she was hiding me. I'm so scared he's going to find me. Hearing Olivia's voice, so full of terror, made my heart clench. Even hidden away, Mason's shadow was long enough to torment her. You stay calm. You are safe at Sophia's, I reassured her. I have him under surveillance. He's not going to get near you. But inside, I knew I had to accelerate my plan. I had to act before he could isolate and terrify Olivia any further. I immediately contacted Judge David Williams, a trusted old friend and my former colleague on the bench. I presented him with a summary of the evidence I had gathered. David, I need you to make an unofficial inquiry. Send a patrol car to do a few slow drive-bys in my neighborhood, specifically past Sophia's house. I want a visible presence. David agreed without hesitation, but not without a word of caution. Elizabeth, be careful. This man sounds vengeful. What you're doing is dangerous, but knowing you, you have an airtight case. I'm sure you'll win. I thanked him and hung up. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at my dining room table, the photos of Mason and Emily glowing on my laptop screen, the video of Olivia's cries replaying in my mind. The pain of his betrayal was a physical ache in my chest. I had once considered him a son, and now he was my enemy. The next morning, while Olivia was at a therapy session with a psychologist James had recommended, my phone rang. It was a number I recognized from the courthouse. It was a man named Michael, the head of the county records office, a man I'd dealt with on several occasions. His voice was low and rushed. Elizabeth, it's not smart to talk long on the phone, but I just saw your name and your daughter's name on a land transfer document. It looked strange. If you have a moment, you should come down here. I frowned, a cold knot of dread forming in my stomach. Olivia and I hadn't transferred any land. A sick feeling made me get up immediately. I told the psychologist's receptionist I would be back for Olivia later. When I arrived at the county records office, Michael ushered me into his private office, closing the door behind us. He opened a file, his brow furrowed. "There's something very strange here," he said. "This property, the family lake house, it was transferred to an Emily Parker last week. The paperwork says you requested the rush processing, but since you didn't call me personally to confirm, it raised a red flag for me." I felt the blood drain from my face. I felt my knees go weak. "That can't be," I whispered, my voice choked. "That house was my husband's. He built it for us. Olivia and I would never sign that away." Michael shook his head grimly and handed me the file. The signatures were there in shaky, unfamiliar script, poorly forged imitations of my name and Olivia's, and the transaction was already filed, already official. Who brought these papers in?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Michael leaned in and whispered, "The clerk told me it was your son-in-law, Mason. He said you'd asked him to handle it personally because you were too busy." In that moment, the rage I felt was so profound, so absolute, it was almost silent. Mason had not only beaten my daughter, not only cheated on her, but he had dared to forge our signatures to steal our family's legacy, the land my late husband had poured his heart into, the place where Olivia had spent every summer of her childhood. He was trying to steal our memories and give them to his mistress. I tried to keep my composure. I asked Michael for a certified photocopy of the entire file. Before I left, he put a hand on my arm. "Elizabeth, this is extremely dangerous. Someone inside this office was clearly paid off to push this through. Be careful. Don't let anyone know I told you." I nodded, my mind a steel trap. But inside, I felt like I was walking on a knife's edge. Mason wasn't just a violent brute. He was a cunning, manipulative criminal, willing to do anything to get what he wanted. That afternoon, I picked up a tired-looking Olivia from her therapy session and drove directly to James's office. I laid the photocopy of the forged deed on his desk. James reviewed it, his fingers drumming a silent, angry rhythm on the polished wood. He finally looked up, a glint of cold steel in his eyes. "This," he said, his voice firm and final, "is the nail in his coffin. We don't just have assault and adultery anymore. We have felony fraud. This is enough to put him away for a very long time." Olivia, sitting next to me, listened in silence, but her eyes, her one good eye, filled with fresh tears. Not of fear this time, but of indignant pain. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He tried to steal Grandpa's house. He tried to steal our home." I took her hand and squeezed it, trying to channel my own strength into her. But I was fighting my own battle with grief. That land wasn't just property. It was the last piece of my husband I had left. It was my family's history, and Mason had dared to trample all over it. That night, I met with Judge David again and gave him a copy of the forged deed. His face was like granite. "Your evidence is ironclad, Elizabeth. I assure you, he won't get away with this." When I got home, I locked all the original documents and hard drives in the small fireproof safe in my study. The clock read nearly midnight, but sleep was an impossibility. I sat in the dark, the pieces of the case spread out in my mind like a complex legal brief. The pain, like a slow, corrosive acid, burned inside me, but it was also a fuel. I knew the time for quiet maneuvering was over. The time had come to face him. There was no other choice. On Saturday morning, I left Olivia in the capable and loving hands of Sophia. Judge David's unofficial patrols had become a quiet, reassuring presence in the neighborhood, and I knew she would be protected. But my own heart was anything but calm. I put on my most unassuming civilian clothes, a simple gray jacket, dark trousers, and comfortable shoes. But in my leather briefcase, I carried a meticulously prepared file. It was my weapon. Inside, in separate, clearly labeled folders, were the glossy, high-resolution photos of Olivia's injuries, the certified hospital report, a thumb drive containing the neighbor's damning video, and the certified photocopy of the fraudulent land deed. Each page was a testament to Mason's cruelty and greed. I drove my quiet sedan not to his home, but to the gleaming glass and steel tower downtown that housed his corporate office. Mason worked in private equity, a world of smoke, mirrors, and inflated egos. It was where he felt most powerful. It was where I would begin to dismantle him. The receptionist, a young woman with a practiced, empty smile, tried to stop me. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mr. Miller is in a meeting." "Do you have an appointment?" I looked at her, my gaze steady, and used the voice that had silenced loud-mouthed attorneys for 3 decades. "Tell him Elizabeth is here. He'll see me." She scurried off without another word. A moment later, I was shown into his corner office. It was exactly as I'd imagined. Panoramic views of the city, minimalist furniture, and an enormous empty desk that screamed of self-importance. Mason was sitting behind it, a smirk playing on his lips. Well, to what do I owe the pleasure, mother-in-law? Run out of knitting to do?" His voice was dripping with condescending sarcasm. I didn't answer him. I walked to his desk, and without a word, I opened my briefcase. I began to lay out the evidence, one piece at a time, like a dealer laying out a hand of cards in a high-stakes poker game. First, the 8x10 photos of Olivia's bruised and broken face. His smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. "The assault," I said, my voice as cold and flat as the glass on his desk. Next, I placed the detailed medical report beside them. The medical documentation of that assault, complete with a diagnosis of a fractured rib. I then placed the small black thumb drive on the desk. The video, from my neighbor's camera. At 1:02 a.m., it captures your wife's cries for help quite clearly. His face was tightening, the color rising in his neck. He started to speak, but I held up a hand, silencing him. Finally, I laid down the certified copy of the forged deed. "And this," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, "is felony fraud. Forgery, wire fraud, conspiracy, I could go on. The document transferring my family's property, my late husband's legacy, to your mistress." Mason looked at the papers, then back at me. The mask of civility was gone, replaced by a raw, ugly sneer. "And what are you going to do with these little papers, Elizabeth? I have the best lawyers money can buy, better than you ever were." I looked him dead in the eye, a cold calm settling over me. "I didn't come here to negotiate, Mason. I came here to inform you. If you want to see who's right, we'll see each other in court." He shot up from his chair, his voice a low, furious growl. "Who do you think you are? Who in this city is going to stand against me for some hysterical woman?" I didn't flinch. "I will," I said simply. "Don't make the mistake of thinking everyone in this world is as cowardly and corrupt as you are." He slammed his hands on the desk, his face turning a blotchy red. "Your daughter is a weak, pathetic woman. She needed to be disciplined. And don't think that dusty old robe you used to wear is going to save you." Hearing him say that, hearing him justify what he did to my Olivia, I felt that white-hot rage from the first night surge through me again. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reach across that ostentatious desk and wipe that arrogant sneer off his face myself. But I held back. I channeled the fury into an icy resolve. I calmly collected my files, placing each one back in my briefcase with deliberate care. I turned to leave. "You walk out that door, you stop being my mother-in-law," he shouted at my back. "And then you'll see how nasty I can really get." I paused at the door and looked back at him, my expression devoid of any emotion except for a chilling certainty. "Consider this then. From this moment forward, you are no longer my daughter's husband. You are simply the defendant." I walked out into the sterile hallway, got in the elevator, and as the doors closed on his furious red face, I took out my phone and called James. "It's time," I said. "File it all." "Get ready, Elizabeth," James replied, his voice grave. "He's going to come back at us with everything he has." I stared out at the city as the elevator descended. "I know," I said. "I'm counting on it." Within days, the world turned against us. Just as James predicted, Mason didn't just hire a lawyer. He hired a public relations firm. Suddenly, the narrative began to shift. The whispers started like a slow poison seeping into the community. I went to the local market to buy groceries, trying to maintain an air of normalcy. But the hushed conversation stopped as I walked by. The sideways glances followed me down the aisle. At the checkout, 2 women I'd known for years were whispering. I caught a snippet. They say she was always unstable, that Olivia. Probably drove him to it. It felt like a physical blow. These people, who had watched Olivia grow up, who had smiled at her in church, were now so easily convinced by the lies of a violent man with a deep pocketbook. I paid for my things, my head held high, but my hands were shaking as I pushed the cart to my car. That afternoon, James called me into his office. He looked tired. He pushed a thick document across his desk. "It's the countersuit," he said grimly. "Mason has hired Ethan Velos, a notorious bulldog from New York. He's claiming it's a shakedown. He's accusing Olivia of fabricating everything to extort money in a divorce. And he's accusing you of malicious prosecution and abuse of your former judicial position." I read the words. They were venomous, crafted to paint me as a bitter, manipulative old woman and my daughter as a greedy liar. Olivia, who was sitting beside me, turned ghost white. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He's making me the villain. He's telling the whole world I'm a liar." Seeing her spirit crumble under the weight of his public assault was almost worse than seeing her physical bruises. I took her hand, a fire igniting in my chest. "No, honey, he's making a mistake. He is underestimating us." But the campaign of terror was just beginning. As I drove Olivia home, we saw 2 of Mason's smirking associates, the kind of men who are hired for their size, not their intellect, loitering on the street corner near my house. One of them caught my eye and mouthed the word, "liar." I didn't react. I just squeezed Olivia's hand and pulled into the garage. But the poison was spreading. That evening, I went to the pharmacy. The owner, a man I'd shared community board meetings with for a decade, pulled me aside. "Elizabeth, be careful," he whispered, avoiding my eyes. "The story all over town is that you fabricated this whole thing to steal Mason's assets because his business is more successful than your late husband's ever was." A chill of pure ice ran down my spine. They weren't just attacking my integrity. They were desecrating the memory of my husband. I thanked him, my voice a tight knot, and walked out of the store feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. When I got home, I found it. A plain white envelope slipped under the front door. Inside, a single sheet of paper with words cut from a magazine. "Shut up or you lose your daughter." My hands trembled, but not from fear. It was pure, unadulterated fury. He dared to threaten Olivia. He dared to use these cheap theatrical tactics against me. I carefully placed the note into a plastic evidence bag. This wasn't a threat. This was another exhibit. Late that night, I had an emergency meeting with James in his darkened office. I showed him the threatening note. He nodded slowly, his expression grim. "Good. The dirtier he plays, the more rope he gives us to hang him with," he said, tapping a pen on his legal pad. "But Elizabeth, this PR war is killing us. Public opinion is on his side. Right now, in the court of public opinion, he's the victim. We need a bomb. We need something so undeniable it shatters his credibility completely." He paused, looking at me intently. "And the only person who can give us that bomb is Emily." Hearing James say her name aloud solidified the thought that had been forming in my own mind. Emily Parker, the mistress, she was the key. She was the one who could corroborate everything, the affair, the fraud, the entire web of lies. But I knew getting her to turn on Mason wouldn't be easy. She was complicit, but she was also trapped. I stood there, in the dim light of James's office, thinking of Olivia's tear-streaked face, of the whispers in the market, of the vile note lying in its evidence bag. The pain, that slow burning fire, flared into a powerful, driving force. I was not going to let Mason win. I was not going to let his lies suffocate the truth. I was going to find Emily Parker, and I was going to turn her. The day after my meeting with James, I knew I had to move fast. Mason's smear campaign was gaining traction, and Olivia was growing more withdrawn with every passing whisper. I couldn't let him win this battle for public perception. I hired a private investigator, a discreet and highly effective man I'd used for background checks on judicial appointments. Within hours, he had an address for Emily Parker, a modest apartment in a nondescript complex on the other side of town. He also had a report on her financial situation. It was bleak. Credit card debt, student loans, a car on the verge of being repossessed. She was living on the edge, completely dependent on Mason's generosity. That was my leverage. I put on a simple pantsuit, something that projected authority without being overtly intimidating, and drove to her apartment building. I didn't wear a cap or try to hide. This wasn't a clandestine meeting. This was a judicial summons, in spirit if not in law. I found her apartment and knocked. The door opened a crack, held by a chain. Emily peeked through, her face a mixture of suspicion and fear. When she saw who it was, she tried to slam the door shut. I put my foot in the doorway. Not aggressively, but firmly. "Miss Parker," I said, my voice calm and low. "You and I need to have a conversation. It's in your best interest to hear what I have to say." She hesitated, her eyes wide with panic. "I have nothing to say to you. You are a named party in a fraudulent land transfer, a felony in this state," I stated, my tone matter of fact. "Right now we can talk in your living room. Or, in a few days, we can talk when you are under subpoena in a deposition. Your choice." The color drained from her face. After a long, tense moment, she slid the chain off and opened the door. Her apartment was small and sparsely furnished. An eviction notice was peeking out from under a stack of magazines on the coffee table. She was in over her head. I felt a flicker of pity, but I extinguished it. This woman had stood by and mocked my daughter. I didn't sit down. I remained standing, a symbol of authority in her small, chaotic living room. I opened my briefcase. "Let's not waste each other's time, Emily," I began, my voice sharp. I placed a copy of the forged deed on her coffee table. Then I placed a copy of her bank statement next to it, showing the large recent deposits from one of Mason's shell corporations. Finally, I laid down a printout of the relevant state statutes on fraud and conspiracy. "Mason promised you a share of that land, didn't he?" I asked. "He told you it was all taken care of, that it was all legal." She just stared at the papers, trembling. She nodded numbly. "He used you," I said, my voice softening slightly, shifting my tactic from intimidation to reason. "Look at this place. Look at your debts. Does this look like the life he promised you? He put you in the middle of a felony, Emily. When this goes to trial, and it will, the district attorney will call you to testify. You'll be implicated. You could face years in prison. Is he worth that?" She finally broke. Sobs racked her body. "He told me he was leaving her," she cried, her voice muffled. "He said she was crazy, that she was trying to trap him. He promised me we'd have everything. But now, he's barely speaking to me. He says I need to lay low." "He's cutting you loose," I said, the final, brutal truth. "He's going to let you take the fall. Because men like Mason always have an exit strategy. And you, Miss Parker, are his." I let that sink in. I watched her as the full weight of her predicament crushed her. "But you have one last chance to save yourself," I continued. "Cooperate. Tell the truth. Testify against him. James Ellison and I will speak to the DA on your behalf. We will recommend leniency in exchange for your full cooperation. It's the only way out for you." She looked up at me, her eyes red and pleading, torn between her loyalty to a man who was abandoning her and the instinct for self-preservation. "What do you want me to do?" she whispered. "I want a signed, sworn affidavit detailing everything," I said. "Every conversation about the land transfer. Every time you were in their house. Every time you witnessed him being cruel to Olivia. Everything." Just as she was about to answer, the heavy thud of footsteps sounded in the hallway outside her apartment. The door handle jiggled, then a key slid into the lock. Mason's two thugs, the ones from the street corner, entered the apartment as if they owned it. Mason had given them a key. They stopped dead when they saw me. The larger one smirked. "Well, look what we have here. The old lady is a long way from home." Emily shrank back, absolutely terrified. I, however, did not move. I slowly reached into my briefcase, and my hand emerged not with a weapon, but with my cell phone. I turned on the video recorder, ensuring the red light was visible. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice resonating with judicial authority, "you have just committed criminal trespass. You are now in the process of committing witness intimidation, a Class D felony in this state, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Please continue. My friend, the district attorney, will be very interested in this recording." Their smug expressions evaporated. They looked at each other, suddenly uncertain. "We were just checking on Emily for Mr. Miller," the smaller one stammered. I see, I replied, my voice dangerously calm. Then you won't mind if I call the police right now and have them come check on all of us? They froze. They were bullies, not master criminals. They were paid to intimidate, not to get arrested. The larger one shot a hateful glare at Emily, then at me. This ain't over, he snarled. Oh, I know, I said. It's just beginning. They backed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind them. The room was silent, save for Emily's ragged breathing. She was pale as a sheet, clinging to the arm of her cheap sofa. She looked from the door to me, the realization dawning in her eyes. Mason couldn't protect her. In fact, he had just sent a clear message that she was disposable, a pawn to be threatened and controlled. I was the only one offering her a lifeline. Okay, she whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with a new, desperate resolve. I'll do it. I'll testify. But you have to promise me. You have to keep me safe. I nodded, not offering a hollow promise, but a statement of fact. If you tell the truth, I will do everything in my power to protect you. I knew in that moment the war had turned. Mason had just lost his most important shield, and I had just gained my most powerful weapon. The moment Mason's thugs scrambled out of Emily's apartment, I knew the tide had turned. I immediately called James. I have her, I said, my voice low and steady. She's terrified, but she's ready to talk. We need to move her now. Within the hour, James had arranged for Emily to be moved to a secure extended-stay hotel suite under a false name, with a private security detail he trusted implicitly. Over the next 2 days, in that sterile, anonymous room, James and I took her sworn statement. Page after page, she laid out the sordid details of Mason's manipulation, his financial control, and his cold-blooded plot to steal my family's property. Every word was a nail in his coffin. The morning of the civil trial arrived with a heavy, gray sky that mirrored the knot in my stomach. I went to Olivia's room and found her sitting on her window seat, looking out at the garden. She was wearing a simple, elegant navy blue dress. Her bruises had faded to faint yellow shadows, but the trauma was still there, deep in her eyes. You don't have to do this if you're not ready, I told her softly. She turned to me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of the old fire in her gaze. Mom, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I have to. I won't let him make me a victim anymore. Today I'm a witness. Tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them back. I took her hand, and it was cool and steady in mine. Then let's go. The courthouse was a media circus. Mason's PR machine had done its work. News vans were parked outside, and a crowd had gathered on the steps. As we walked through, I heard the whispers. Some were supportive, but many were hostile, fueled by the narrative Mason had paid to create. He was already inside, holding court with his slick lawyer, Ethan Valos, looking confident and unassailable in a bespoke suit. He shot us a look of pure contempt as we took our seats. The trial began, and the courtroom felt like a pressure cooker. James was brilliant. He was calm, methodical, and relentless. He began by presenting the evidence of abuse. He projected the high-resolution photos of Olivia's injuries onto a large screen for the jury to see. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. I saw one of the jurors, a woman about my age, flinch and look away. Then, James played the audio from Sophia's Ring camera. Olivia's desperate, choked sobs filled the silent room. Mom, open up, please. It was devastating. I glanced at the jury box. They were utterly captivated, their faces a mixture of horror and pity. Beside me, Olivia trembled, and I put a protective arm around her shoulder. Valos, Mason's lawyer, was slick. On cross-examination, he tried to paint Olivia as an unstable, emotionally volatile woman. Isn't it true, Mrs. Miller, that you were unhappy in your marriage? That you were looking for a substantial payout? But Olivia held her ground. I was unhappy because my husband was abusing me, she answered, her voice clear and strong. The turning point came when James called his next witness. The plaintiff calls Emily Parker to the stand. A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. Mason froze, his face a mask of disbelief. He shot a venomous glare at Valos, who looked just as stunned. He then turned his furious gaze on Emily as she walked past him. She flinched, but kept her eyes fixed on the witness stand. Her testimony was the bomb that shattered Mason's case. In a quiet, trembling voice, she corroborated everything. the long-term affair, the financial dependence, and most damningly, the conspiracy to commit fraud. He told me it was his land, she testified, looking at the jury. He said his wife and her mother were trying to keep it from him, and he had a right to it. He had me sign papers. He said it was just a formality to put the property in a trust. I didn't know he had forged their signatures. I never would have agreed to it if I knew. Then James asked the final question. Miss Parker, did you ever witness Mr. Miller being cruel to his wife? Emily took a shaky breath. Yes, one time at their house. He mocked her in front of me. He called her pathetic. When she started to cry, he grabbed her arm and shoved her into the hallway. He told her to stop being a baby. Then he came back and he laughed. That was it. The dam broke. You lying bitch, Mason roared, lunging to his feet. His face was purple with rage, the mask of the charming businessman completely obliterated, revealing the monster underneath. I gave you everything! The courtroom erupted. The judge hammered his gavel. Order, order! Mr. Miller, you will restrain yourself. Two bailiffs rushed forward and forced a struggling, shouting Mason back into his chair. He had just confessed his guilt, not with his words, but with his uncontrollable rage, for the entire world to see. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with a sense of profound calm. I was no longer just a mother fighting for her child. I was an officer of the court, a guardian of the principles I had spent my life upholding. I looked at the jury, at the judge, at the people in the gallery. For 30 years, I sat on a bench and listened to stories, I began, my voice clear and steady. I have seen the way power, greed, and arrogance can corrupt a person's soul. My son-in-law is not a victim. He is a predator who believed his wealth and influence placed him above the law. He beat my daughter. He stole from my family. He terrorized and manipulated everyone around him. But today, in this courtroom, he is not above the law. Today, the law is above him. The judge's verdict was swift and absolute. He granted Olivia the divorce. He issued a permanent restraining order. He voided the fraudulent land transfer, returning our family's property to us immediately. And then came the final blow. He awarded Olivia a monetary judgment that encompassed every penny Mason had, stripping him of his ill-gotten fortune. Finally, he announced he was forwarding the entire case file, including the evidence of assault, fraud, and witness intimidation, to the district attorney's office with a strong recommendation for immediate criminal prosecution. Mason just sat there, slumped in his chair, a broken and defeated man. His empire had crumbled in a single afternoon. As we walked out of the courthouse, the sun finally broke through the clouds. The crowd on the steps was different now. The hecklers were gone, replaced by a sea of supportive faces. Sophia was there, and she ran up and hugged us both. Justice is served, she whispered. 1 year later, the air at the lake house was sweet with the scent of pine and fresh water. I sat on the wide porch my late husband had built with his own hands, a glass of iced tea sweating in my hand, and watched my daughter. Olivia was laughing. A full, free, joyous sound that echoed across the water. She was down by the dock, teaching her new golden retriever puppy, Oliver, how to fetch a stick from the shallows. She looked radiant, her face full of life and light. The shadows in her eyes were gone, replaced by the sparkling fire I had missed so dearly. Mason was where he belonged. After a short criminal trial, he was convicted of aggravated assault, felony fraud, and a slew of other charges. His 10-year prison sentence ensured he would never harm another woman again. His company was bankrupt, his name a local synonym for disgrace. Olivia had not only healed, she had transformed. She re-enrolled in law school and was at the top of her class. On weekends, she volunteered at a domestic violence shelter, using her story not as a source of pain, but as a source of strength to help others. She was forging a new legacy, one of compassion and resilience. Emily, having received a probationary sentence for her cooperation, had moved to a new city and a new life, sending a single anonymous postcard that simply said, "Thank you." Olivia came running up the steps from the dock, the giddy puppy nipping at her heels. She plopped down in the chair next to me, her smile bright enough to light up the world. "He finally got it," she said, still laughing. "It only took 20 throws, but he finally brought the stick back." I reached out and squeezed her hand. "You're happy, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion. She looked out at the sparkling water, her expression peaceful. I am, Mom. I really, truly am. We did it. I smiled, a real deep smile that came from the very bottom of my soul. Yes, we did. We sat there in comfortable silence as the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. The war was over. The wounds had healed into scars of strength, and my daughter, my brave, beautiful daughter, was whole again. We had our peace. We had our future, and in that perfect, quiet moment, we lived happily ever after. This story is a work of fiction, but it's inspired by the strength of countless people who have faced the unthinkable. The names and places have been changed, but the courage is real. I'm genuinely curious about your thoughts. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have fought back? Or would you have chosen a different path? Let me know in the comments below. Your story could be the light someone else needs to see. Thank you for staying until the end. God bless, and remember that courage is the first step toward a brighter day. Be sure to check out 2 more of our most beloved stories on the end screen now. I promise you won't be disappointed.